Hey everyone, welcome to another live video, and what I'm talking about today is behavioral issues in kids and how typically if there is chronic behavioral issues happening all the time, there's some type of like cognitive or sensory stressor that's stressing out the brain and causing them to kind of act out and have those behavioral issues. So maybe they hold it together, all day at school and then they let it all out when they get home. Usually it's because they're balancing, these difficulties and their basic body function isn't where it needs to be as far as those cognitive and sensory stressors. So what I mean by that is cognitive is like brain development. So if you picture, the way that your brain develops, if it doesn't develop as well as it should, or there are certain spots that are missed or certain spots that are underdeveloped, they're going to have a cognitive stressor, which is going to stress out the brain and kind of put it in that fight or flight state, as well as if they have sensory stressors. So if you picture, what they sense, if it's, texture or hearing, if it's really high, it's going to stress out the brain, or if it's really low, it's going to stress out the brain. So you want it to be where it's supposed to be. So, if they have hypersensitive sense of sound, or if they have hyposensitive sense of sound, that's also going to stress out the brain and can contribute to behavioral issues. So the way that I think of it is like the brain develops like a pyramid. So it starts at the base and then it develops up. And just like a normal pyramid, you would want a really strong base so that the next layer can be really strong, and then the next layer can be really strong, and so on until you get to the very top where your cognitive area is developed. And your cognitive area is where you have good academics and good emotional control and language skills and stuff like that. But if anything below that didn't develop as well as it should, or it's not as strong as it should, or like I said, it's just underdeveloped, you want to go in and strengthen those areas so then you can have a strong cognitive area where a lot of your behavioral control is at. So if you missed a step, along the way and something is underdeveloped, you rely more on lower level parts of your brain, and that's like your amygdala, which is in control of like fear and aggression and fight or flight, and a lot of where behavioral issues start. So that's why if you don't develop those areas like you should, and you're not relying on that cognitive area, you're going to be more relying on areas like your amygdala, which is always in that fight or flight state, which is causing you to get in those behavioral issues. And that's because you have some type of cognitive or sensory stressor. So my job is really to find any sensory or motor systems that are underdeveloped and they're not developed to their fullest, and then build them up and strengthen them. So the cool thing about your brain is it can change and you can build those areas up and make that pyramid stronger so that the very top can be where it needs to be. But the two most common things that I see in kids that are not fully developed, and the two most common things that I see that go underdeveloped and can contribute to behavioral issues, is one, they have something called primitive reflexes. And these are reflexes that we're born with. We have them as a baby. We should have them till about 6 months of age. I always think of them as training wheels. So the first about 6 months of life, you have these training wheels for your brain. It just kind of helps get everything going. And then at 6 months of age, you should be able to take off your training wheels and you should start being able to build up that pyramid. But many kids don't take off those brain training wheels. So they stick with these primitive reflexes and it keeps everything in this kind of underdeveloped state, which is eventually going to stress out the brain all the time and can lead to those behavioral issues. So that's one thing. And then the second thing, the most common thing that I see is core musculature is weak. So that is really the very base of the pyramid that needs to provide stability for the top. So in order for your brain to work optimally, in order to have those, well-functioning academic brain and emotional brain and language development, you actually need to have a strong core musculature. That's what needs to develop first before any other part of your brain can really develop as well as it should. So if your child's always hunching over, or if they're W sitting, which means they're kind of like sitting on their knees with their legs pointing back, if they have difficulty like riding a bike, if they're having difficulty like hopping on one foot or playing hopscotch, that's usually an indicator that their core musculature is weak, and that needs to be built up in order to have a strong brain. So if they're hunching, or if they're W sitting a lot, they're actually going to roll their pelvis posteriorly, which affects their ability to take in deep breaths. And then from there, that doesn't deliver the amount of oxygen that your brain needs. So if they are hunching over a lot, or they are W sitting a lot, that's actually going to cut off the amount of oxygen that should be going to the brain, and that's going to put your brain further into a fight or flight state and can contribute further into, behavioral issues. So, like I said, my job is to find the areas of the sensory system and the motor system that are underdeveloped or weak, and then make them strong again. So I basically make a program for you or your child to strengthen the areas that are weak in the brain, or the areas that you missed along the pyramid, to strengthen them up. And I can really do it in two ways. I can do it in the office, or I can do it virtually, which is a new thing I created because of the virus. So I can actually create an at-home exam for you to complete, and then I interpret it, and then I give you a program to develop those areas according to the exam that are underdeveloped. So if you have any questions about any of that, always feel free to call me. Number's 402-504-4676, or you can direct message me and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. But I hope that made sense, and how the brain develops as a pyramid, and you need to develop each stage as well as you can. And if you don't, then you need to go back in and develop whichever stage was weak in order to have a properly functioning cognitive area of the brain, which is going to affect behavior and academics and emotions and stuff like that. So hope that made sense. If not, give me a call and I'll try to answer any questions you have. So I'll see you guys tomorrow with another live video.